Hi everyone, thanks for coming today. My pleasure to be here and hopefully give you guys some useful information, or at least new information, I hope, that's going to help you get funding to get your medical device businesses off the ground. And whoever's getting a good angle for me. Okay, great. So so I have lots of experience. Primarily, my focus has been in government funding. So I'm going to touch a little bit on some of the non-government programs as well, where it's a flavor and a sampling. But mostly I'm going to focus on the big government programs. So to start off, this may be obvious to some of you, but just a quick primer on the sort of the two things we're talking about here. So one is grants. So that's on the right. You guys know this well. They're very competitive. Typically, you're going to get money up front as you go through a project to help cover your funding, meet the requirements. You might be eligible and get the money. You may not. You're in competition with lots of other people. Tax credits are different. These are an entitlement for you. And basically, if you meet the requirements of the program, you're entitled to the funds. This has to run through a business, and it gets to be part of your tax return. So that's, when I talk about tax credits, that's what I'm talking about. There's only really a few that are applicable for you guys here, but I'm going to talk about them. And one of them is, Canada's single largest investment in business innovation, the SRDD program. The other thing to know about tax credits is that the ones available in Canada, you can actually receive before you're a profitable business. They're what they call refundable. So if you're a small startup, you can still access this money even without being profitable. Okay, so on to the next thing. So I'm just going to give you a high-level overview, background on the federal budget from 2017, and you probably heard the focus was on innovation. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what that means in terms of what they actually committed to funding-wise. The goal, obviously, to make Canada a world-leading center for innovation. Sounds great. And the other thing to note is that all of this can change when the new federal budget comes out late February, early March of this year. They're going to probably announce a bunch of new 2018 programs, and things could look quite different. So definitely watch out for that budget when it comes out, and RDP will be releasing some updates on that, some analysis, and as will all the big accounting firms. But we'll be looking at it from the standpoint of business innovation funding, really. Okay, so this was known as the Innovation and Skills Plan, and the funding that they offer for businesses really falls into three main categories. You have your innovation and R&D funding, probably most applicable for what you guys are doing here, and commercialization. You have your talent funding, so this is making talent accessible to businesses, subsidizing placements, learning on the job, access to collaborations with researchers from universities and academic institutions, and then market access, which is really focused on helping businesses a little bit later down the line get access to foreign markets typically. So it's funding towards marketing, but I'll get into all the details as we go through, because I have quite a few programs to talk about with you guys. From your point of view, the easiest funding to get access to when you're a very early stage business is the talent funding. So if you have need of talent that you must get access to, then this is an opportunity to offset some of that cost by collaborating with an academic institution or even just youth hiring. So if you're hiring anyone to work for you who's under 30, there's grants available for that. The next easiest, we'll say, mid-easiness level, innovation and R&D. That's going to be the most applicable. There's more funding for early stage work for that compared to the market access, which is usually you have to be somewhat established before they're going to invest in you. And the government looks at it more in terms of how are you doing as a business? Is it worth our investing in you? Can you show sales growth and that sort of stuff? So if you're pre-revenue, market access is tougher. Okay, so in the budget, the government sort of listed priority industries, and those included advanced manufacturing, agri-food, clean tech, digital, which is very vague, health and biosciences, which is good news for you guys, and clean resources. So in terms of where that funding went, I'm going to get into that a little bit. But in terms of the health biosciences funding at the federal level, most of that money was directed towards academic research funding as compared to business funding, at least in terms of the specific stuff that was meant to be for health and biosciences. Of course, NRC got money, and they put some of that money into their National Centers of Excellence, which is meant to support you guys. Some of those places become accelerators. They may offer awards and grants, and they also have support services and things like that. So that's kind of where that money went. And just in terms of the funding commitments, you can see there's some really big ones on here, and I'm going to go over them. They're not, all of them are not applicable to you guys, but you may have heard about them. So I wanted to just cover them so you have a little bit of background on how it applies to you. So you see some big ones. There's one there called SIF, that's the Strategic Innovation Fund. There's super clusters, 950 million. These are over multiple year spans, about 5 years. And then you see the next, the number one biggest thing is the SR&ED program, which dwarfs everything else in that category in terms of budgeting. So I'm going to cover the SIF first, because that's quite a big chunk of money, and it's been very widely talked about in the media, and lots of people got very excited about it. A lot of my clients got very excited about it because there's no limit on the amount of funding you can get. The way that the eligibility criteria is worded is very open. So they've said, you know, any industry can apply, and these are the types of things you can apply for: R&D and commercialization, development and testing of innovative products, processes, and or services, firm expansion and growth, investment attraction and reinvestment, and collaborative technology development and demonstration, as well as forming clusters. They'll fund that as well. So it's been sort of left open to the entire spectrum of innovation activities. In terms of what we've seen with it so far, they have had a hard time processing applications under this. It opened last August. They received something over 1,000 by now, and they have not assessed many of them. They haven't even replied to most small business applicants. They've approved so far $100 million for Linamar, and I think a $1 million grant for an automotive manufacturer in Windsor, and that's about it. And we've heard from them, you know, we're backlogged, we weren't expecting so much interest. So essentially, what I would say to you guys is this is an unlikely opportunity for startups. And the other thing is that health and bioscience was not listed for this program as a priority sector. It's replacing automotive aerospace funds. So, but I wanted to just kind of cover it for you guys. The next flashy thing that the government did in the budget was the Innovation Superclusters Initiative. So the goal with this was for them to give money to consortia of businesses with academic partnerships that were going to allow them to set up what they're calling superclusters scattered across Canada. They're looking to do about 5 or 6. And they're going to fund those clusters, which in turn will run their own programming, which may include funding for other businesses. It may include just setting up collaborative projects. And that's all dependent on what these supercluster consortia who apply decide they want to do with the money. So where this stands right now is they had a bunch of applications last year. They've shortlisted some, and pending results to see what they're going to actually approve. And then pending, once they say who they're giving the money to, what those clusters say they're actually going to do. What they're meant to do is, you know, increase collaboration, get access to foreign markets, all sorts of things like that, and increase diffusion of innovation throughout the community. In any case, how does this apply to you? So most likely your opportunity here is for this to trickle down. Your business may be wanting to join one of these super clusters. So I'm just going to go through the ones, you know, sort of where they're at with the shortlist. None of the shortlisted candidates are specifically in health, bioscience, or medicine. So the one that's kind of applicable is they talked about the digital technology supercluster out in BC. That one is about big data collection, analysis, and visualization. And they mentioned health tech as one of the target industries that they would provide that support for. And then you have AI-powered supply chains in Quebec. That could benefit you later when you become widely successful and you have to deploy millions of products across the world, and advanced manufacturing as well. There may be some opportunities for you there because there's going to be some material science and potentially support for actually commercializing and scaling up manufacturing. The others are primarily focused on sustainability and clean tech and agri-food, and almost all of them have digital technology as a key component. So you'll remember in the budget they mentioned digital as a priority. So anything you're doing that has a digital angle is potentially going to get you a better chance of getting funded or be more attractive to the government. Okay, so now I'm going to get into stuff that might actually apply to you guys. And I've broken it into those same 3 categories that I mentioned at the beginning. So this is the R&D, innovation, commercialization funding. And I've tried to focus on stuff that's accessible to early stage businesses, and I'll get in a bit later to things that may or may not be applicable depending how far along you are. But the first one, the biggest one, the one that I probably devote most of my energy to in my day is the SR&ED tax credits. So this, again, is one of these entitlement programs. You meet the criteria, you are entitled to the funds. So it's essentially meant to be an incentive to encourage businesses to take on risky R&D and offset some of that cost. So you can see that it's open to all Canadian for-profit enterprises in any sector. And I'll just briefly go over the criteria without getting too deep into it. Essentially, you have to be making a scientific or technological advancement by overcoming a scientific or technological uncertainty and carrying out a systematic investigation or search. The good news is that people in your sector typically are following that process and that method, so you're likely, very likely to qualify. And what you have to do to get access to this one is file a special claim with your taxes. So you have to be a business, you can be incorporated, you can be a sole proprietorship or a partnership as well. If you're a corporation, you get access to the enhanced rate if you're a small business, which is around 40% in Ontario that you can get back on the dollar. So the costs you can claim are your labor, outsourcing contractors, and materials that you might use for prototyping, anything that's consumed in the course of R&D. You can claim your overheads as well, which you have to go through and enumerate and sort of say, here's all my overhead costs that were directly related to doing this work. Or you can use a method called the proxy method, where you take your labor costs and you mark that up and you get sort of an overhead markup. So it's that's the basic framework for the costs that you can claim, and that's pretty similar for most of these. It's labor, materials. A lot of them don't even cover materials, and they're labor-based. So for this one, you want to be paying people on salary to take the best advantage of it. So if you're working for yourself and you have some kind of money to draw a salary on, this is where you can get a credit against that. You can also do creative things with your accounting, where you could say, if you're not concerned about affecting, from a business standpoint, your balance sheet, you can say, I would have paid myself this much had I had the money. You can earn a tax credit, and then in the future, when you're wildly successful, you can pay that salary you owe yourself and get your tax credit later. So this is a case of you have to have the money up front to do something, and then you can get this back and sort of put it back into the process. So this is sort of, once you've got funding, this is a great opportunity, and you should all be taking advantage of it. Okay, there's a few complications for academics with SR&ED. Mainly, we've seen it with actually with medical professional corporations is where it's cropped up. So a lot of it's academic clinicians, and there's become this confusion in terms of, is the work being carried out by the company of doctors, or is it being carried out on behalf of the academic institution where they're appointed? So my only advice is, if you are, you have an academic appointment, you should take care to structure your business in a way that makes it really clear that it's separate from that and from your obligations. And this is where it's good to probably get some advice and have someone look at it for you, because they're definitely cracking down on this. And mostly it's been to try and prevent doctors from claiming, because they've taken the position that this is already publicly funded. And I'll skip over that one. So the next one that's probably really within your reach is called the Industrial Research Assistance Program. It's IRAP. It's run by NRC. So this one is open again to any small, medium enterprises. So when you see SME up there, that's what I'm talking about. With less than 500 employees, you do need to be incorporated to take advantage of this one. And essentially, this provides support for development, commercialization of innovative, tech-driven products, services, or processes. So R&D in a nutshell. And it also encompasses some of the commercialization activities that something like SR&ED would not. If you are a startup, typically you're going to be able to take access or get access to their accelerated review process. And the funding they will usually offer you is 50% of contractor fees, 80% of internal labor costs, to a maximum of $50,000, and you have to come up with the rest of that. So your 20% of internal labor and your 50% of contractor costs, and prove to them that you have that before you begin the project. And they will release the funds to you as you go. So you sort of start paying, you make a claim on a monthly basis, and you get reimbursed for your time. The way that this works is you have to reach out to the IRAP program, you meet with a representative, they'll come out, you'll tell them about what you're planning, about your business, where you're at, and then they will tell you, yes, you're a good candidate, I would like you to apply, and they'll invite you to make an application. So you sort of have to go through this pre-screening meeting, which frankly is good because then you don't waste your time. And they may also give you some advice on come back in 6 months or come back in a year when you get to this milestone. The whole program has about $220 million in funding, and they can give up to $400,000 when you get later. So as you get later stage, you've done one of these $50,000 ones, the returns have been good, you're still in business, you can go back to the well a number of times, and they actually prefer to do that and work with the clients that have shown good results. So this is definitely a great program. 2017, they didn't give out a lot of money because they had sort of pre-committed it due to some miscommunication about how much funding they were actually going to get from NRC. But 2018, the funds are flowing again. They're taking meetings with new businesses again. And now's actually a really good time to reach out to them because they get their new budget in April. So all these federal programs, government programs, the fiscal year is April to March. So early in the year is a great time to get going on one of these. Okay, so next I'm just going to go through a few others that are maybe a bit more of a long shot, and you kind of have to hit it just the right moment. But one of them is the Health Technologies Fund. So this is a province of Ontario. It's delivered by the Ontario Centres of Excellence. It funds pre-market evaluation and early adoption, but you have to be offering a technology that sort of answers the challenge statement offered by the program. So the 2017 theme was better care closer to home. And the people who got funding were doing things like bringing medtech to someone's house to do things that previously couldn't be done. One example was like a home brain scan. So I don't know what the themes for 2018 is going to be, but they're going to be releasing that this spring. They're going to update it and have a new version. Again, that's going to coincide with the government budgets. So for this one, there's two sort of streams. There's pre-market evaluation, where you have to be collaborating also with a health service provider, a publicly funded health service provider. So you have to find a partner in your project that's willing to do it with you. And pre-market evaluation is basically using it in a validated healthcare setting, understanding conditions for implementation, and developing more evidence that will help you sell the technology later on to more people. And the early adoption is the next phase of that. So you've already done a pre-market evaluation. Now you're working again with a publicly funded health service provider, and they're going to adopt your technology in a few different locations and just scale it up. And again, really the whole goal of this is to help you create evidence that's going to help you go out and sell to other people and say, here, I have a proven case where this was used and this is how effective it was.
Is that part of the A12 program?
Separate, yeah, that one's, yeah, this is not that. So the deal with this is they should be announcing it in the spring, and then you'll kind of move as quickly as you can with that to make applications, and depending if what you're doing is going to meet the challenge statement for this year. So keep your eye posted for that. Ontario Centres of Excellence is a really great resource to follow. Join our mailing list because they're going to release news releases when these things come up. So I definitely recommend doing that. Okay, here's another one. This one is partnering with colleges and universities across the country for a project that lasts 4 to 6 months to address a specific company challenge. So this one you can get up to $25,000. The way that the money flows is actually to the researcher that you collaborate with at the college or university, and you would be the industrial partner, or maybe vice versa, depends what your scenario is. But essentially, they will fund a 4 to 6 month project and the costs of the research team at the university to help you solve a specific problem for your business. Again, you have to be a small, medium enterprise. For all of these company ones, you typically have to be incorporated to be able to take advantage of it. Okay, here's another one delivered by Ontario Centres of Excellence. This is not specific to this field. This is open to any sort of field, but it's specifically geared towards spin-offs that were created to commercialize IP from an Ontario academic research institution. So this one will offer you up to $250,000 combined. Again, there's a couple of phases of it to establish market readiness for your product. So there's two streams. First stream is customer creation. So you kind of have to be a little bit further along here than the previous one that I was mentioning. You've done some preliminary validation of your technology, and now you're trying to create demand with customers. And you have had at least some sales at this point, and then they'll work with you to grow that further and actually work on the marketing part of how to get that going. And then the second one is the company building program. This is once you've actually got the business going, you have a business model, it's scalable and repeatable, and this will help you take it to the next level by developing processes and management and a way to become a sustainable company and attract follow-on investors. So you've probably received investment, you've gotten so far, and they're going to help you a little bit further to get to become sustainable and stick around. And then another OCE one I told you OC was a good one. Small Business Innovation Challenge. So this is challenge-based funding. Right now, they don't really have any open challenges that are probably applicable to you guys, but essentially they will put out a challenge statement, and then vendors are, Ontario small medium enterprises are welcome to come in and say, I have a solution to your problem. Can I work on it with you? And they'll fund you through 2 stages. First stage is the feasibility stage, and they might fund up to 100% of your project costs for an attempt to establish technical merit, feasibility, and commercialization potential for your solution. And then phase 2 would be you've completed phase 1, and they'll actually do development and demo stage where they'll give you up to 75% to $1 million. So this is a really big one, but you have to be right in the lane that the government wants you in. Right now, the 2 challenges are cannabis and drug-impaired driving, surprise, surprise, and electronic sales suppression, so tax evasion. But you may see something come up that's relevant. Keep your eye on this one. Those are the government's priorities. Okay, and then this is the last 2 that I'm going to kind of talk about in this stream. Oh, no, wait, there's 3. They're definitely later stage programs, but I thought it would be worth knowing about kind of what you can get as you go along. So this one's called Going Global Innovation. This is open to Canadian researchers from private companies or from universities or even from non-government research centers to carry out not quite trade missions, but collaboration missions internationally to meet with prospective partners for doing a project together. So if you had someone, internationally that you wanted to collaborate with on your project, this would fund you setting up a trip to go meet them, talk logistics, set up the contracts, all that kind of stuff. And they'll fund up to $75,000, so multiple trips over a certain period of time. It also covers things like cluster inception, export assistance, obtaining market information, so some consulting. As it's going to tie into process and product development, it does not cover your pure R&D activities, though. So it's sort of the precursor to maybe your next phase of R&D where you're deciding, do I want to collaborate with this person? Is this going to be a good market for me to be in if I have this collaborator in this country? That type of thing. And then finally, under this category as a sort of government fund is the Build in Canada Innovation Program. This one would apply to you if you were designing something that a government department can use. So essentially, this is the government of Canada saying, we will spend $500,000 buying a solution from you for our department as a pilot. And so you can again say, this has been used and done, and use it as a way to sort of get more business as a study, a case study. So this one, they have specific challenges out. Most of them are military. So again, you have to kind of look out and see what are the challenges that the government department is putting out. But you can actually, if you have something that you think is worthwhile, you can reach out to a department and say, would you be interested in this? And if they express any interest, you can then apply for this. Because they may say, sure, if you can get it approved under a Build in Canada program. So this may not be super relevant to most people, but worth knowing about. Okay, and then this one is, again, investing in business innovation. It's meant for early stage businesses to sort of get to late stage development and early stage commercialization of innovative, unique products and processes. It says FedDev, but it's actually an Ontario program. It's sort of a transfer payment thing from the government. So the way that this one works is you have to prove to them that you have funding for a particular project that's going to cover these types of activities. You have 1/3 of the money yourself. You have 1/3 of the money from an accredited angel or VC, and then they'll put up 1/3. But what they're giving you is not a pure grant. They're giving you a loan that you have to pay back with very, very favorable terms over a long period of time. So I have a client that received this in 2016, and his loan is not due until 2024. So that's the type of terms, and the very beginning of your payments are very small, and they sort of grow them up from there. So they're very careful about only investing where a VC is investing. So it's really meant to make it more attractive for someone to invest in you guys. So you can say, well, I can get this IBI, and that covers this much extra money, gives you that much more runway. So this one is a bit of an involved application process. They definitely do a lot of due diligence on you, but definitely a good option if you're courting investors and it looks like that's going to go through. You can look at making a claim, not a claim, a application under this program. And then these ones I'm sure you guys are familiar with. So a lot of, the accelerators have R&D challenge programs. I just put up a few as purely as an example because there's, probably 20 active ones at any one time. So, examples are like OCE, Ontario Centers of Excellence. Again, will do competitions at their Discovery Conference where they'll give out a $20,000 award for innovators. Last year's was the Accessibility Innovation Showcase and Tech Pitch Competition. Ontario Brain Institute has Entrepreneurs, which is for Ontario neurotech entrepreneurs, and they will offer you up to $50,000 in project funding as long as you're partnered with an Ontario-based academic or research institute. And they're going to be announcing some new details on that in spring 2018. So if any of you are in neurotech, that's an option. There's Health Edge at U of T, which can give you a $5,000 fellowship award. The contest ends tomorrow, unfortunately, but there will be another one. And then Mars has Procurement by Co-Design. This one is sort of similar to the Buy in Canada program or the Ontario Centers of Excellence Challenges, where they get service providers, healthcare service providers can put challenge statements up again and say, we're looking for this XYZ solution. And you as an individual vendor company could respond with a brief saying, here's how the solution I would offer you. And Mars will give you between $15,000 and $25,000 to commit to use their procurement by co-design process. So basically you're committing to following a certain framework and following a certain process. And then after that, up to $50,000 will go towards the health service provider purchasing your solution. So it'll make it more attractive for them to buy it, and also you get some money for the actual co-design process. So you're essentially working in tandem with them, collaborating on the research, making sure it meets their needs. So that's a Mars one, and then as I said, there's many more. And then on top of that, not even health-specific ones, you've got things like the Next 36, Next Founders, TIE Toronto, Startup Canada, N100. These are all startup challenges. And typically what they'll offer you is a mix of, some of them will give you a prize, but that's a pure grant, or a non-dilutive grant. They'll give you access to VCs. So you'll get to meet a lot of VCs, and in some cases, they'll actually guarantee that one of these VCs will invest. They will give you advice, networking, mentorship, and training. So Next 36 is open to university and college students under 30 or in their final 2 years of study who graduated within the last 2 years. So sort of that 2-year window before you graduate and after you graduate. Next Founders is open to basically any promising Ontario entrepreneur who has raised private matching funding. There's also Next AI, where if you're doing something AI related, that would apply. The N100 is Northumberland County's annual open invitational for tech startups. The prize is $100,000, but the hitch is you have to set up business in Northumberland. So if you're willing to go east, you could consider that. And Startup Canada has a Women Founders Fund where they'll offer a $5,000 grant plus $2,500 towards startup marketing. I think that's in kind, so they kind of give you startup marketing services. So those are just, again, a few of the startup grants, and there's lots of those. So that kind of covers the funding landscape in terms of early stage R&D. You can see that there's not a lot that's really specifically directed towards what you guys are doing. There's more high-level general programs. If I was going to pick one, IRAP would be a really good one to go after. At least try and get a meeting with them, get on their radar, and sort of start building that relationship, because it will pay off. Sometimes they'll come back to you later when they have budget and say, oh, I haven't given away all my money this year. What do you think? You want to do a project? So definitely recommend that. So the next area I'm going to talk about is the talent funding. So this is where they are subsidizing a hire, essentially. And the hire has to meet certain criteria that are government priorities. So you would have to, in your business, incorporated business again, bring somebody on that meets the criteria, and then you can apply for one of these grants. You have to do it before you do the hire, and that can sometimes slow things down because it takes between 4 and 6 weeks in some cases to get approval. But I'll go through all the programs. They're kind of in 3 different categories. You have youth employment, so that's again under 30s. Work integrated learning, which is internships, fellowships, and then skills development, which I didn't cover. Actually, I didn't put that program in, but it's training. So say, for example, you had to do some kind of non-regulatory training and you're going to run the cost through business, you can get a grant towards that of up to 2/3. So the first one is IRAP again. This is their youth employment program. So they will give you up to $15,000 a year towards an under 30 hire in a tech-based role in a tech-oriented company. Basically, again, the goal here is to create a job, and so that's why it's a lot easier to get these ones, because if you're hiring someone, you've created a job, and they have a really easy way of sort of defining that payback. So this one, again, you would meet with a rep from the IRAP program. Mm-hmm.
Can you technically hire yourself if you're under 30?
I don't think so, because you technically already work for yourself. But this is where if you're going to meet with IRAP anyway, you could ask them that question. I have not seen that successfully done, but it's always worth a try. Yeah, so that's the under 30s one. Then there's NSERC Experience Awards. So this is for hiring new grads in a tech-related role. Again, tech-related company sounds familiar. This one, they'll just give you for $4,500 per new hire, so it's not quite as attractive. Let me see if there's anything else I can tell you about that one. But you can hire, if you're really growing, up to 15 people and get $4,500 for each of them. Next are some of the more work placement ones. So you have Talent Edge, which is where you can get fellowship and internships for either PhD and postdoctoral fellows. That can get you up to $35,000 over 24 months, or current undergrad and master's students with an industry partner. So as long as you're the industry partner, you can bring somebody in, again, from a research institute and get them funded. Yeah, so the fellowship is $35,000, and then the internship, you can get $10,000 over 4 months. So if you just want to bring in someone for the short term, you can get up to $10,000. And it's pretty much any project-based activity that has clearly defined goals and milestones, and it's oriented towards the student's area of specialization. So again, not sure if you can hire yourself for that, but it might be worth investigating. Next one is My Tax Accelerate and Elevate, very similar program, $50,000 over 24 months for PhD interns' wages, up to $25,000 per year. And My Tax Accelerate is up to 50% of a master's or PhD's intern wages to a maximum of $7,500 per 4-month internship period, and you can do up to 3 of those in a row. So again, these are really good if you know you have to bring on extra help and you're going to pay them and you have to pay them. You have no choice. Can't get anyone to do the sweat equity. This is one way to cover that. And then there's tax credits as well. These are probably not super applicable for what you guys are doing, but you never know. Apprenticeship, probably not. Co-op tax credit. So say you had to bring someone in that was a specialist in engineering and they had to do a co-op placement. You could get a tax credit of $3,000 for whatever you paid them over their co-op period. And that would go again with your tax return. So that kind of covers like all the hiring type stuff. Next up is market access funding. So this is the probably not applicable category for you guys just yet, but once you get somewhat established, you start getting sales, you can show a growth curve, you can start getting access to some of these funds. And these are really to help you grow internationally. So first one is called Can Export. You can get up to $100,000 per company, and it's really for trade missions. You pick a certain country where you haven't had any sales, and you do international travel costs covered, trade show costs covered, developing marketing material. You have to translate documentation, market research. So this would be the point where you've kind of got an established business in a certain jurisdiction and you want to replicate that elsewhere. You can get up to $100,000, but this one is a 50% matching, so you'd have to pay $200,000. And they'll obviously do smaller projects than that. Export Market Access, EMA. This one is for trade shows. So this is just for going to any international trade show. Doesn't have to be in a brand new market for you. It could be somewhere that you already are. You just can't do Canada. You can get up to $30,000 per trade show, and you can do up to 5 trade shows in a year. And again, they're going to fund half of your costs. And again, they will call you an emerging exporter. So you have to have less than $500,000 in sales, essentially. But they do want some established track record. Usually have to be established for 2 years before they're going to consider giving this to you. And you have to have some sales. You can't just be going from 0 to this. And then Ontario Exporters Fund, say things are going really, really well, they will fund you hiring an export manager. So for example, if business was established and you wanted to get someone to help you export, this one's available to you, and they'll pay up to $80,000 towards that. And life science is one of the priority sectors for these. So that sort of covers not everything, but the most applicable stuff for you guys in terms of the federal and government funding. Any questions?
Thank you, Andrea, for this, and yeah, that was very good presentation. I think I'm open for questions because
Is there any outside of Canada funds that you can apply for?
There are some contest funds. There's actually one that's, I remember which country. Well, there's like Canada-US collaboration ones that are out there. The one that was going closed, but might reopen again. So there's some of those. Typically, they only want to fund companies that are already established in their jurisdiction. So the Canadian funding only funds Canadian companies. It doesn't fund it funds attraction of external investment, but you have to set up a corporation wherever that is first. So you sort of have to get set up in the jurisdiction, and then you can probably make a case to some of these, there's like Eurostars. There's also Eurostars collaboration grants that are out there for businesses if you have a partner company in Europe and you're doing collaboration. There's some money coming from China now too, again, for collaboration projects between Canadian and Chinese companies. I don't think the Netherlands has anything right now, but and Korea, I think, is coming up with some stuff too. So those are usually for bigger scale projects, but definitely if you have an opportunity to collaborate with someone that's in a different jurisdiction, it's worth checking to see if there's one of those, because those are sort of partly funded by the Canadian government and partly funded by the foreign government.
Is it possible to file shred on your own, or do you have to get a tax professional or an accountant? Because I know it's pretty complicated.
Well, so I'll say if I had my own company, I would file my own shred. I have been doing this for 11 years, but you can definitely do it on your own, especially for a small claim. What we offer is like a review service. So we'll say, do it on your own. Here's kind of a DIY package. Go ahead. And then we'll look it over for you for, spend a couple hours on it. You can pay us $500, that kind of thing. But definitely you can do it on your own. Currently, the way that they're assessing stuff is if you're a first-time claimant, they're doing what they call first-time claimant advisory service. So they're coming for a meeting saying, we're accepting your claim as filed, but we're going to come for a meeting and talk to you about what we liked about it, what we didn't like about it, what you should do different next time. So not every company's getting that, but you have a chance of getting that as a first-time claimer. But eventually they will come and do an audit on you. It's a bit of a roulette game who you get and how lenient they're going to be. If your claim is huge, then they're more likely to come. If you're closer to really early stage development, you probably are going to have an easier time, because where it gets really hard is as you go further on and your business matures and you're making little incremental improvements, then you start getting into philosophical debates with them, like what's a technological advancement, and then it gets into what documentation did you keep. So really keeping good evidence is the first step towards making sure you can do a shred claim, and tracking all your costs well. So have a good accounting system. Whatever you do, as long as you have a system for it, usually the first time they'll be pretty understanding and they'll kind of work with you on it. And then once you get that first assessment, you kind of have to shape up, or they'll come back and potentially deny your claim. We're definitely seeing it get tighter and tighter for businesses, and the program did take a big dive in 2009, got much, much smaller, and it's under new management now. There's a new director general. They're talking about reviewing it and revising some of the guidance, but I would suggest, at least talking to somebody, and most providers like me will give you, free phone consultation. You can just talk about what you're doing and say, do you think this is even eligible? And you'll get some honest advice like don't bother, or maybe, or here's your risks, for free. And so if you ever have questions, I'm happy to answer them and get my card. Okay. Well, thanks everybody. My pleasure. I hope you got something useful out of it.